It's been a while since I did a video. Thought it was time. It's a Saturday night and I ain't got nobody. Well, here's the thing. I've been questioning myself over the last few weeks, probably longer than that. And the question I have is, am I the dumbest smart guy in the world? Am I just the dumbest smart guy in the house? Since I'm the only person in the house, that one's pretty much answered. But I don't feel as smart as I used to feel. Here's the thing. I started reading before I was 3 years old. By the time I was 4.5, I was able to type letters, and send them to my grandfather. Because I was living in Texas. I was living in Tokyo, Japan. He was living in Pennsylvania. Obviously, my dad filled out the envelope and whatever. But still, I was able to type letters to him. I basically learned everything pretty quickly. Most of the time, it was math. The only math I ever had trouble with was geometry. And that's because I just didn't understand theorems. Everything was written. It wasn't like just straight up numbers. I had trouble with geometry. Every other math, passed. A's all the time. I learned Japanese when I lived in Japan. It was kids' Japanese, but I still learned Japanese. I used to know how to count all the way up to 100 in Spanish. I learned how to count up to 50 in German. I didn't do well with French, but then I only had like 2 classes of French. I used to know sign language. I still know, certain things. I know, the symbols and whatever. But in general, I don't know that. When I first had my first computer, not my computer, but I got a job back in 1983. Just so, do the math. Anyhow, got a job in 1983. It was the first time I'd seen a computer. I'd never seen a computer before. That sounds weird in today's world, but computers weren't everywhere. But I go to this hospital. Everyone in the department knows how to use this computer. I don't know how to. And by the end of the first week, I'm sitting there thinking, my goodness, how are all these other people able to learn this thing and I couldn't? And then I told myself, wait, if they learned it, then I'm going to learn it. And by the end of the next week, I had learned the entire thing. I learned something that they told me was probably going to take a month. Learned it within that second week. Because the first week, sometimes you get the worst training. The lady who actually trained me, she wasn't bad, but she was geared towards other things. So the first week, they just pretty much ignored me. Then over all those years, I started moving up. I had a lot of leadership positions. I had a lot of success. I had some things that weren't necessarily successful. I lost a job, found out why I lost that job years later. I then had another job, did well, ended up losing that job, found out why I lost that job. And it was never that I didn't do the work right. It wasn't that I didn't work well with my employees. It's just one of those kind of things where there's certain industries that you're in and you start to find out that just because somebody is in a position of authority doesn't necessarily mean they know what they're doing. That probably works everywhere. Still, here I am. I've learned all these things. I used to read tons of books. And you know what? I memorized most of it. I'm not religious, but I actually read the Bible 3 different times. And I had a couple of other Bibles. They weren't Bibles. Let's see, what do you call it? They were written more with a modern language than, so-and-so begat this one, so-and-so begat this one, whatever. I used to know all that stuff. I used to know certain things that I could use against people who got on my nerves and they didn't like it. And then I would tell them, look, here's the thing. Look up Luke whatever or such and such, this thing here. Because I memorized all that kind of stuff. I read a lot of science books. I read a lot of history books. I didn't read a lot of what they used to call the American literature. So, I never read Tom Sawyer. I never read Huck Finn. I did read Pride and Prejudice. I read just a few other books. But, in other words, I was one of those kind of people. I read a lot of science books, science magazines. I just used to take all this stuff into account. Then when I had my last full-time job at a hospital, I became a consultant. So I traveled the country doing consulting work. I also spoke in 7 different states on healthcare finance, leadership, diversity, and a couple of other things. In other words, I was one of those people who put a lot of stuff out. I used to write music. I actually have, I think, what do I have? Like something like 27 songs that are copywritten that I wrote. I finished in the top 600 out of a songwriting contest of over 25,000 people. I was a member of ASCAP, American Society of Composers, Artists, and Publishers. I was a member of that organization. I was a member of a whole bunch of organizations. And for a while there, things were going really, really good. I had 2 years where I made about $425,000. Did well. And then things started changing a little bit here and there. I did okay with cash, but I had certain issues because one of those kind of things that everyone doesn't think about, and you really need to about certain things, is that when I made the really good money, I knew nothing about that kind of money and taxes. Who was I going to ask? I couldn't ask my dad. I couldn't ask my mother. There was just nobody to ask any of those questions anymore. Even though I belonged to a chamber of commerce at the time, I didn't know who to ask for that. Later on, I had an accountant friend who I called her up one day after I got the first letter from the IRS saying I owed them $27,000. And then I got the second letter from them, even though I started paying, saying, oh, by the way, now we need another extra $24,000. And eventually I got out of it because I was incorporated. My accountant got me incorporated. You do great. The thing with incorporation is you don't pay federal taxes. You pay state, you don't pay federal taxes. Sounds like everything was solved, right? No, because I never thought to ask, by the way, if I'm not paying federal taxes, what happens when I get to Medicare age? What happens with that? And it turns out that because I had certain jobs earlier on, I actually, get basically a normal level of Social Security money. But had I still worked as an employee, I would be getting a lot more money. And I never knew any of that kind of thing. And it's when stuff like that comes up, you start wondering, you know what, maybe I'm not as smart as I thought I was. Maybe I'm just super stupid because I didn't know who to contact for anything for the longest time. And I didn't want to talk to just my friends or anything like that because folks kind of viewed me in a different way. And I didn't want to look like, you know what, he's not the smart guy anymore. He doesn't know what's going on. I don't know how to help him. So I just kept it to myself. And, at a certain point, you feel lost. You don't really know what to do. And you start saying, maybe, I just didn't know anything. Right now, I have a part-time job where I drive around and I deliver pharmaceuticals to folks. And I had this car that had one of those kind of things put on the car so that, you can do the remote starting, whatever. And it does this other thing where if you hit the button, you get out of the car, but the car is still running. You can hit this button and it will lock all the doors. Sounds good, right? I had no idea how that was supposed to work because the doors weren't locking. And when it comes to my phone, we all have these smartphones these days. I had no idea how to turn down the sound so that if I got a phone call, I would hear the ring or I would hear like the buzzing. I had no clue how any of that worked. And I just felt really, really stupid. I'm thinking, yeah, I used to be this brainy guy. I would take these science books and history books and whatever with me to bowling because I bowled for, let's see here, 30 years. I bowled about 30 years, a little more than 30 years. And these guys would just pretty much say, how could you bowl and read these books at the same time? And I said, well, I'm not up there throwing the ball all the time. I throw the ball, I sit down, I read. You guys are talking about stuff I don't know anything about. I'm not really interested in about, so I might as well just read. So you get to that point. And then you start to learn a couple of weird lessons. I ran into a friend of mine. I had known her since the early 80s. She actually coached me on how to sing a certain song because she was in music, how to sing a certain song because it began with singing before I started playing the piano for it. And for the last wedding I did, one of the songs I did was from Phantom of the Opera. And of course they picked this song and it hit a couple of high notes and I wasn't sure how to sing that. Same person. Anyhow, I run into her outside of one of the grocery stores, actually the one I share a backyard with, and we're just talking about different things, and she leads me into some ways of finding some kind of assistance because I just didn't know what to do. Had no clue. I wasn't prepared for any of this. I'd gotten divorced in 2020. My mother passed away in 2021. Now it's just me having trouble landing another job. Just no idea. And there were still things I knew I was good at. I could still program my computer. I could still, write these articles. It was a whole lot of stuff I could do, but none of that was the stuff that was going to help me move on. I thought about it later on that, back in the day, you were just smart because that's just all it was. You didn't have to think about anything else. I won 2 national scholarships of all things. No, let me rephrase that. I won 2 letters of achievement, federal letters of achievement. I got 3 scholarships, didn't go to any of those schools. I didn't know anything about anything that was outside my realm of experience. That's just how it was. I know I'm not alone on this. There's things that a lot of us, we need to know it, but we don't know that we need to know it. Then we get to a point, like I said, where I meet someone, she tells me these different things that I could possibly do, and by the end of the year, things are going a little bit better. Then by March, things are starting to go a little better. And now, things are still going a little better. The thing I was telling you about the car? It turns out that I knew how to start the car without having to be there, so I can be in my bedroom, decide I can start the car, let it run, use that in wintertime. It turns out all I had to do was push the button once, and it automatically locked the cars. And I thought, well, how come I didn't remember that? And then I thought about it, I said, actually, it's not anything I ever had to use before. Because it's not like I was going around anywhere. I wasn't going to the store and letting the car just run and I needed to lock the car. There just wasn't a thing I did. With the driving job, where I'm delivering pharmaceuticals, it's something I need all the time. And there's just a whole lot of other stuff that comes up that suddenly I say, oh, that's how it works. I still don't know how to work the phone. I'll find someone else who has a Samsung one of these days and say, by the way, how do I set this up so I can hear when the phone rings? It's one of those kind of strange things where all of us, as you get older, probably even when you're younger, but we have to find our ways of getting the information we need. When we're sitting there and we feel really dumb, even if we are smart, and everyone's got different levels of smart, or you're smart in one thing and maybe not smart in another, but we all have these different levels. We can reach out to somebody. These days, we can look stuff up online. I mean, that's been a savior for a whole bunch of things with me. I look a lot of things up online, but these days, Google, DuckDuckGo, Bing, they're using AI. I don't want a response from AI. I want to be able to look stuff up online and find the information I need. Eventually I'll find it, but sometimes you have to keep figuring out, okay, how do I ask this question so it stops telling me AI? Just take me to the pages so I can read everything. I come to the conclusion, I'm still a pretty smart guy. I'm not a dumb guy. Most people really aren't dumb. We're smart in the areas that we're supposed to be smart in. We may not be smart in other areas we should know because they haven't affected us yet. This is weird. If any younger people see this, here you guys go. There was this word, S-U-S, sus. I'd been seeing a lot on, online or on Instagram. No idea what that was. I had to go look it up, and I looked it up, and I saw the definition and said, I don't understand this at all. A couple years ago, the word was cis, C-I-S. It took another friend of mine, a younger friend of mine, 2 years to get me to understand this because it didn't fit my reality. We didn't have stuff like that, 40, 50 years ago. It's just one of those kind of things where sometimes you have to take that step back and say, you know what? I'm not smart enough to understand this on my own, to learn anything about this on my own. Even if I look it up and I find a definition, I may not understand that. Maybe I don't necessarily need to know that. And if I need to know the other stuff, I'll figure out ways. And that's what I've been able to do. So if I can do something like that, everybody can do something like that. That's just what I have to say. Yes, it's been a rambling thing. Hey, I ain't been here 3 or 4 weeks. Let me know what you think. Let me know how your life is going. I hope you're enjoying the summer if you're in the United States. I think we broke our record of, we had a record of only 8 days in a row of 80 degrees or higher. Well, we broke that. I think we're going to hit 12 or 13 before we finally have a day where the high is in the 70s. The stuff that happens in today's world, right? Anyway, my name is Mitch Mitchell. Let me know your thoughts. Y'all take care.